All right. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm your moderator, Rob Pagetta. I'm a radio and TV personality in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And as I look out the window, we've got a little bit of light snow. It's been such an up and down weather forecast in the last week, just like the industry that you guys are in. Welcome to the Best Practice Sharing webinar from IFOL in partnership with Paymerang. Now, today we're going to be focusing on how you can prevent payment fraud in 2024. Why? Well, over 56% of US companies were affected by B2B payment fraud in 2023 alone, and this is set to rise. So no wonder over 74% of those who took part in IFOL's annual AP Leaders Priorities Research suggested that fraud prevention is high on the agenda of 2024. So we're going to get started. Firstly, by meeting our panelists. We've got three amazing panelists here today to help you with your research and education in this matter. So firstly, let's kick things off with Deborah. Deborah, why don't you talk about yourself here, please?
Sure. So I am an accounts payable speaker, consultant, and trainer, and I focus on the vendor setup and maintenance process that can really be responsible for bringing in that fraud to the organization. But I work with accounts payable team members to help them add in those, authentication techniques, internal controls, and best practices, vendor validations in order to avoid fraud, fines, and bad vendor data.
And Deborah, we worked together at a past seminar, which was very educational on my end because this is kind of new to my world. And thanks for being on the panel again. It's greatly appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
First time having her is Sierra. Sierra, why don't you talk about yourself a little bit, please?
Thanks, Rob. So my name is Sierra Lindgren. I am the Senior Fraud Analyst here at Paymerang. So my team and we are the ones that are helping Deborah and the accounts payable teams. So we're reviewing payments. We're taking a look at invoices. We're making sure that your payment is actually going to the correct place. And I'm really excited to be here to discuss maybe those best practices that your organization can take to make sure that you're not sending money where you shouldn't be.
And where is that accent coming from, Sierra? Where are you? I love it.
So I am actually right outside of Richmond, Virginia. No one around me has an accent like I do. I say I'm a little bit further north than I should be. I should be down in like South Carolina or Georgia.
Love it. I love it. And you work closely with this next gentleman, Matthew. Matthew, please tell us about you.
Thank you, Rob. My accent is a little different to Sierra's. My name is Matthew Kirkpatrick. I'm the VP of Business Development here at Paymerang. I primarily speak with CFOs, controllers, director of finance folks all across the country, helping their organizations basically educate them about our platform, what we do here at Paymerang, and bring on new clients all across the country.
How long has Paymerang been around?
We were founded here in Richmond, Virginia in 2010. So some of our clients have been using our platform for 14 years.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to kick things off. We've got a few questions. We're not going to take up too much of your time. We should be done around 11:45, but it's important for you to participate in these little quizzes. So we're going to kick things off with a poll. The question is, how do you verify vendor detail change requests? Is it through A, email, B, phone calls, C, mail, D, bank account ownership validation tool, or none? So if you can take a moment and click on one of those, what you feel is the correct answer to that, that will give us some insight as to what you guys are thinking, and we'll be able to work around that number with an answer. And Deborah's going to probably start us off in just a moment. And we'll go from there. So Matthew, you originally from, while we're waiting for some of these?
I am originally from Sheffield in England, so northern England. And I came to America in 1996 to play soccer in college, or football as I call it.
And here you are.
And here I am.
Fantastic. So it looks like we've got 83% of you said it would be through a phone call. Deborah, do you want to take over from there?
Yes, and I do want to just kind of point out here that the bank account ownership validation tool, only 9% indicated that they use that. And don't feel bad, because those if you had a bank account ownership validation tool, you would probably still need another way to validate vendor banking, because you may not find as many of the accounts as you expect to find. So you still have to have another process in place. And 83% doing the confirmation call, that is typical. I would say, though, that a best practice, because that confirmation call by itself is not the silver bullet, because if it was, we probably wouldn't even be here, to not do the confirmation call, if I said that the right way. Like, keep doing it, but surround it with some other internal controls as well. And so one way that is, you can do this immediately is once you, for example, if you have a vendor banking change, do the confirmation call, make the change, send the payment, but within 48 hours of sending that payment, do another confirmation call, this time just confirming that they received the payment. And you can do that within 48 hours. They should be able to see it and tell you. And that timeline is very crucial, because if, for example, it was a fraudulent payment, you still have time now to recover it. You should be still within your bank's threshold for recovering those payments. And that is much better than finding out days, weeks, sometimes months down the line, when the vendor notices that it's gone, that it's a fraudulent payment, because by that time it's too late to recover it.
I was just going to ask that question, Deborah. What is the window of opportunity? So, like, if you're 2 months down the road, you just kiss it goodbye just because it's been waited. You just didn't follow up fast enough.
Yeah, so typically banks can vary on that threshold to recover. Usually it's around 48 hours. But if it goes beyond that, there is still some hope. There's been some success with the Secret Service recovering your funds, of all people, FBI. And then also I read an article about how the local police were able to recover funds. So it's not typical, but it can be done. But your best chance of recovering those funds is finding out as soon as possible. And the way to find out as soon as possible is just call the vendor and make sure they received it. And you can only do it, restrict it to like the larger payments, so you can do it with all, whatever you like to do. But it is something that you could do immediately, and doesn't cost anything to put it into place.
Fantastic. Thank you. Sierra, over to you.
So I did notice that a small percentage actually do verification through email. So my expertise here at Paymerang is business email compromises. That's what we see on a regular basis. And what that is, that's a technique that fraudsters use to trick your accounting departments. And to Deborah's point, they're tricking you to send that ACH to a fraudulent account, knowing that you probably won't follow up within that 48 hours and that money is gone. So what I want to just reiterate is there's so many different types of business email compromises. The two that I want to talk about are like your full intrusion ones, and then what we call a vendor impersonation. So your full intrusion business email compromises, it looks like it's coming from your real vendor. So it means that their system has been hacked in some sort of way. So they're sitting in there, they're watching emails flow in and out, they're watching your communication, invoices. And to Deborah's point, if you're calling a number in the bottom of an email, that may not be the best practice either, because it may be a fraudulent number that you're calling. So you've got to make sure that you have multiple steps in place to be sure that your money is getting from your door to your vendor's door. So just because you receive an email and it does look like it's from your legitimate client or vendor does not always necessarily mean that it is. One of the biggest things is look for grammar. The fraudsters always mess up. The subject line might look okay, but there might be a key word or key phrase within the body of the email that's throwing you off. One of the biggest things that I see is the word kindly. So we work with local law enforcement, but we also work with the FBI and different field offices across the nation here in the United States. And when I asked one of the local FBI agents, I said, why is that? And he said, most of the fraudsters that are committing this crime, what they're doing is they're using a translation app, translating it into whatever language they're trying to translate it into. And that's where the grammar might fall. And you might be able to pick that up. So switching gears just a little bit, a vendor impersonation where it's a fake email. What they're going to do is they might use a capital I in place of a lowercase l. So when you're glancing at that email, it looks legitimate because again, who has time to sit there and scrutinize an email, right? We just want to get it done as quickly as possible. But that's where one of the best practices is to take the @ sign and go all the way down to the end of that email domain, put it in your web browser. It's going to bring back a website if it's registered. Again, this is just another best practice to reiterate that this is actually a registered email. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's legitimate, but it's a registered domain. So if you are communicating with your vendors and verifying information through email, a best practice is to follow Deborah's advice. Pick up the phone and call. Confirm that they've received that payment once you've actually initiated it on your end.
I like it. So actually talk to a human being.
Yes. And
Now,
make sure you're calling a number that you know, that you recognize, not a new one.
Yeah.
Matthew, do you have anything?
Yeah, well, nothing major, but Sierra does a lot of training, a lot of education within Paymerang, and we've always learned that like there tends to be an unnecessary level of urgency and like hastiness to some of these requests from these vendor impersonators, and they often tend to be really pushy and aggressive, which is usually a red flag as well. So a lot of time you got to trust your gut as well.
You guys are detectives. I love it. So I'm just curious, and maybe our attendees are as well. What has been the largest dollar value theft you've seen?
So I'll go first on that one. And this was actually a couple years back, but it was with the whole deep fake. There was a fraud where a controller thought that he received a call from his director. It sounded just like him. And he transferred, because they were acquiring a company, and he transferred $35 million based on that one call that sounded like his director.
Wow. Did they get it back?
That's a good question. I honestly don't remember, but that's not a good day when 35 million goes out. But I do want to say that, you know, if you're a smaller company, you're thinking the fraudsters are not looking for you. But according to the FBI's IC3 report from last year, the average fraud loss is $123,000. So if you've got payments in that range and maybe even lower, because that's the average, they are still coming after your payments as well.
Yeah, you're definitely on their radar.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to our next question. Thank you very much, panel. What payment types do you use? Do you use a check, B, wire, C, ACH, D, virtual card, or all the above? So again, we'll give it a moment for everybody to kind of chime in, and we can go from there. Deborah, are you still by Detroit? Is that where, if I recall correctly, that's where you went last time? We had an event.
Yeah. I'm in Detroit, and last week I was at a conference in Florida, and so when I got on the plane, it was 6 degrees, and then when I hit down in Florida, it was, I think, 55 or something. So I was a very happy camper. Although Floridians thought it was cold, I saw at least one person with a parka on. Just saying. So.
Well, I used to live in Fort Lauderdale and for a couple of years, and it was funny. It got to 52 degrees once, and people were running around looking for toques. I'm like, are you kidding me? All right, looks like we've got our answers here. So we've got 69% say all of the above. So everybody is using, oh, we got 0% for a virtual card. So everybody's using a check, a wire, ACH. So Matthew, why don't you start it off and kind of comment on what you see here?
Yeah, I mean, when I speak to CFOs and controllers and organizations all across the country, we still see a lot of people still using checks. And when we hear about the checks, we often bring up positive pay. And what I find amazing today is that a lot of people still aren't using positive pay to protect their checks. And for those that don't know, I'm sure most of you do know, but positive pay, it's an automated cash management service to deter check fraud. So what do the banks use positive pay to match the checks a company issues with those it presents for payment. So, and then any check considered suspect is sent back to the issuer for examination. So a lot of folks don't have positive pay in place, Rob, and what that means, check fraud is, we've seen a huge spike in check fraud over the last few years, especially during the pandemic. So it just means that you're vulnerable if that check gets stolen or intercepted, and then if you don't have positive pay in place, then those funds can be stolen by the forces. So we see a lot of that. ACH is popular, and we hear about that all the time, that people do ACH in-house, which is great on the surface, but the problem with that is a lot of folks aren't doing ACH in-house securely. And what I mean by that, and Sierra's got a lot of stories and input with this as well. But what they do is when they sign up a vendor, they're not collecting the ACH information in the beginning securely. Meaning that it's either they put ACH on invoices and they're getting the ACH information from the actual invoice, which is a big no-no, or they're collecting it over unencrypted email, writing it down, storing it on spreadsheets. And if you do have a ransomware attack or anything like that, then all that information is exposed and vulnerable. So there are some ways that you need to collect it securely and then store it securely, which is the best way to kind of do ACH. Virtual card, that's interesting because that's where everybody should be going towards, because virtual card is fast, is secure. The virtual cards, typically there are deposited with the money. The money's on the card, but it's preloaded the exact amount of that bill to be paid. Rob, the way we do it at Paymerang anyway. So once we've made that transaction, that quote card disappears and it can't be used again. So definitely more secure in the virtual card area. But a lot of times people are still 100% check or 95% check, and it really is kind of unnecessarily exposing these organizations to that check fraud.
So would you say because of the virtual card being pretty much zero, it's education, people just don't know the benefits of using a virtual card?
Yeah, and it's sometimes a lot to manage, and it's, bouncing around on different things, and they've always done it this way, so they're doing it the same way they've always done it. With Paymerang, that's our kind of primary payment method that we do. But yeah, a lot of time it's just the kind of people are creatures of habit, and they've always done it a certain way, and people are kind of sometimes a little hesitant to change, even though change would be the best thing in this situation.
Deborah, did you see a pivot during COVID going from one use to another?
Yes, and it wasn't a positive pivot. I mean, I get it. It was the converting, the big thing was to convert all of your check payment vendors to ACH payment vendors, right? Because it was a hard time getting in to generate the checks and then having someone sign it. And then even when you sent it, the vendor probably wasn't in their office to get it. And so there was this huge strategy and push for ACH payments, but the problem is that there were not enough controls around collecting that that banking information. As Matthew talked about, it was being collected unsecurely and stored unsecurely, right? And so that collection process and that change process just kind of led to more fraud. And so what I recommend as a best practice is don't just accept what they give you, a banking on vendor letterhead or bank letterhead, right? Have your own form, require your own authenticating data on that form. Definitely don't collect it from an email, because now you don't have that form to collect that authenticating data and the banking details from. And when I talk about authenticating data, I mean, if you're going from check payment to ACH payment, you can still ask for the tax ID. You could still ask for the remittance address. You can even put, and I recommend, an internal employee and their contact information on that banking form. So if anything is suspicious in the email or maybe on the form itself, now you have someone to contact. You could even add in little red flags on the form, such as have the vendor put their country and then have them put their bank information and have the bank country field there as well. And then that way, if the payee's country is different than the bank country, that's a red flag. So you always want to have your own forms, not to mention you want to put just any obstacles in the way so you don't make it easy for a fraudster to, pass you fraudulent information. And that banking form with all that authenticating data is one way to do that, because they may just look at that form and go, I'm just going to go to the next potential victim. That's not asking all that information.
Yeah. Real quick, Rob, I think there's a false sense of security when it comes to ACH. People think that it's the most secure. And when I speak to the folks around the country and they say, oh yeah, we pay 80% of folks by ACH, we're good. And then when you actually peel back the onion and talk about it, it's actually not good, because they're exposing themselves, and that's what these criminals and these sophisticated fraudsters are looking for. So I think people do get a false sense of security.
Yeah.
So
And
so go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have one thing to say. Matthew mentioned about the positive pay, and I still, just like he, run into teams that don't have it in place, but I also run into teams that have positive pay in place, but they don't realize that they can still have a fraud depending on the type of positive pay. So make sure that if you have positive pay, that it's really payee positive pay, because regular positive pay is they're verifying the amount and the check number, but payee positive pay is they're verifying the payee, the amount and the check number. Because if you're only doing the one level, someone can just, whitewash the name and that check would still go through. So make sure you're doing payee positive pay.
And we call it payee positive pay, Rob. But when I speak to some folks, they check into it and they actually do have it. They just didn't know they had it because the banks just call it positive pay. But you've got to actually look to see if you've got both types. Yeah, like Deborah.
Verify it.
Yeah, I want to just go back to the form. So not being lazy and individualizing that form is important. Just have little key questions or information they've got to insert to make it their own.
Yes, yes. And if they're changing banking to old banking to new banking, have them put the old banking on there. And if they don't have it, that's a huge red flag.
Sierra, do you have anything to add to this?
I will just add to Deborah. So we have a secure portal that our vendors can put their banking information in. And if they want to change banking information, one, we don't go in and we don't put in any banking information. It's their responsibility to do it. But to Deborah's point, if they want to change it, there's a screen that pops up that says, please input your old banking information. They have to put their old banking information in prior to putting their new banking information in. And if they can't and they don't know what it is, then we default back to a check and we do a re-verification once they receive that check. So that is a key thing. If they don't know what the old one is, that's a problem. Everybody knows what their old banking information is. They can find an old check somewhere. They can find an old statement, whatever it may be. It's something that you can get. So don't let someone tell you, oh, well, they don't know what it is and they can't find it, because it is something that you can actually get your hands on pretty quickly.
Right. And if they have the access to get the new banking and the authority to give it to you, then they should have the same to get the old banking.
All right. Great hints. Let's move on to another question. Question is, excuse me, how often do you train your team on fraud threats? So let's go with our choices. A, monthly, B, quarterly, C, yearly, or you don't remember the last time you did. So while they're answering that question, Sierra, Paymerang, tell us a little more about Paymerang. Is there a website in case people need a little extra help here?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to paymerang.com, that all of our information is there. There are some great educational resources on there as well. A lot of our webinars that I do, a lot of our one-page documents to go over kind of the best practices that Matthew, Deborah, and I have talked about today. Those are on there as well. You can also schedule some time with any of our representatives, whether it be a sales representative with me. There's some contact information on there as well. We are here to automate accounts payable. That's what we do. We just pay all of your vendors, and we want to make sure that it's done in a secure way because not everyone has the accessibility to that.
Awesome. And of course, IFOL will be sending you a copy of this and give you more information as the upcoming seminars will be continuing to have throughout the year. All right, looks like, 37% don't recall the last time. 27 yearly, 27 quarterly, and 10% monthly. So, Deborah, why don't you chime in on this one? Because that's kind of a little startling, isn't it?
So yes, and what's ironic here is that the conference I was telling you about in Florida last week, that was with cybersecurity awareness professionals, and they were all talking about how can we improve, how can we get more engagement, and I was there to tell them that, hey, all of that is great. But I just don't think that cybersecurity awareness training, that you get on that, quarterly, annual basis is enough for the accounts payable team, right? We can't just not click on a link. We can't just not download attachments because that's how we get the invoices. That's how we get vendor supporting documentation to do that vendor ad, to change that vendor, change existing vendors. And so we can't just not rely on that. Also, the whole urgency thing. Yes, the fraudsters use that, but we get a lot of urgent invoices. And if you ask internal employees, they're all urgent, right? And so we need more than that. And so what I recommend is that the accounts payable vendor team find a way to have consistent training, not only on, cybersecurity awareness, but also on the scams, the new frauds that are popping up against, AP and the vendor team. Have a source where you can find out, for example, that a couple of years ago, there was a new scam alert that said that fraudsters know how to use CSS code to remove the external indicators, because now you know that you can no longer get the warm fuzzies if you get an email from an internal employee to, change something on behalf of the vendor, because that external email indicator may have been removed. So you do need to have that training. And once you find training, find those new scam alerts, let everybody know, have it be an agenda item on your, on every meeting, so that security or cybersecurity awareness, being in that secure mindset, is always a priority.
Matthew?
No, nothing to add really. I mean, I think there's different types of training, right? We have required training for our employees quarterly, and we have to go on and do some modules. So, but that's just kind of scratching the surface. You need to do a lot of additional ones specific to your operations team. So thankfully at Paymerang, it's something that we do not only for our employees, but obviously we do it for our clients as well, and a lot of webinar and best practices that Sierra leads. So
yeah, Sierra, this is forever changing, isn't it? You have to be on top of your toes.
It is. I think I know what fraud is going to happen, and then I get a report from the ACFE, or I get another report, and it's like, no, you're way out of line. You have no idea what's happening. Ransomware was big last year. They're not really forecasting ransomware to be as big this year as it was last year. But again, it's a forecast. No one really knows. But we really just have to make sure that our trainings match the job role and responsibility of our employees.
Exactly.
I can't tell you how many corporate companies that I have been around or actually been a part of where they've assigned me a training and I have no idea what it says. I am not an IT person. I don't know IT terminology. I'm a fraud person. I know banking terminology and banking knowledge. Yep. And I think to Deborah's point, if you have someone in your accounts payable department, you need to show them what their job role and responsibility is and how they can help be that first line of defense, and train them based on what they see. We don't need to train them about the headers in an email. That's what our info security team does. We just need to train them on how to actually get that email to them. Like, don't forward it, because then you're going to lose all of that valuable information behind it for your info security team to look at. So it's just making sure that your training is efficient for the employees that you're actually training. So we're redoing our training for all of our external clients and vendors. And we are putting together a packet for particular departments. So I'm working on a packet right now just for our accounts payable and our accounts receivable departments, to go out and train those folks, because those are the ones that I get down with when I travel and do educational seminars. It's very rare that I talk to the director of technology or the CFO. I talk to the ones that are doing the job every single day. And those are the ones that I want to help the most.
Rob, I think being specific and deliberate is the key here. And I think too many folks will just do like generic things and tick a box. Oh yeah, we did Q1 security training, and it's just too generic. You've got to get granular, you've got to get in there, and you've got to be very specific.
All right, let's go with some final thoughts, Deborah.
Final thoughts is, yes, we need internal controls, authentication techniques, best practices, vendor validations. But I think the ultimate solution is to just get, AP out of, and the vendor team out of the remittance, collecting and storing process, and have that be with a payment provider that can store it for you, that can make those payments. And now when you get an email to say, hey, change my banking, you could just send it to them. And it not only helps with external fraud, but also internal fraud as well, because that information is not stored in your accounting system or ERP. And so it's not accessible by the internal fraudsters either. So it's a win-win both ways.
Matthew, any final thoughts as well?
I mean, yeah, just to echo Deborah's comments, I mean, there's a reason why we outsource payroll, right? Because it's just efficient, and they're the experts, and we just let them handle it. You should be looking at accounts payable like that. Like, Paymerang, we're the experts. This is what we do all day, every day. And it just frees your team up to do other things and more strategic things, and you don't have to kind of have that responsibility and kind of do everything in-house when a company like Paymerang can just take it off your hands in a secure way.
And Sarah, your final thoughts.
Just two things. Fraud is always going to be a big problem. It's never going to stop. It's only going to get worse. Take a deep breath. Make sure that you're not moving so quickly that you forget those small details, because if you bypass those small details, that's when fraud's going to happen. Whenever I do my webinars, I always tell them, there is nothing that is so critical that it has to be processed that exact second that you get that email. Pick up the phone, call, do a verification, make them fill out that detailed form that Deborah was talking about. If they send you an email with banking information, tell them you don't want it. You'll send them that form. So just make sure that you're giving them a little extra hoops and jumps, because if they're a real vendor and they really want that information and they really want that payment, they're going to do it. Real vendors understand what's happening in the world. They understand fraud. And they're willing to fill out those forms, and they're willing to do what they need to do to make sure that they receive their money in a secure way.
And Rob, last thing, they're not only willing, but they appreciate it, right? They appreciate the level of due diligence and taking that extra step, like Sierra said. So don't get overwhelmed by this. We're here to help. A company like Paymerang, we actually see ourselves as an extension of your AP team, and that's why we can help you. It's not just about us handling it. We're an extension of your AP team, and that's where we can really work together well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to our panelists. Your expertise in this ever-changing fraud world has been just amazing. Thank you to the rest of you for joining this webinar. We hope you have some ideas of how you can avoid payment fraud in 2024. We look forward to seeing you again on our next webinar, which is happening February 13th. And I'm going to leave you with this. ID theft is actually no joke. My friend Sid was a victim of it. He had to change his name to simply S. You get it? Sid spelled with ID theft. Yeah, terrible joke. You're going to use it. I know you are. I'm Rob Pagetto. Again, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you February 13th. And reach out to these wonderful folks because they've got great answers and helpful hints to work with your clients and save them identity theft, money theft, company theft, whatever it may be. Bye for now.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rob.